Hello, welcome to the Botanical Night. This is night on Ishigaki, one of the southernmost islands of the whole Japan, with big and small islands, very close to Taiwan, almost tropical island. And here, nearby my hotel, this palm, the bottle palm, is now flowering, most conveniently. So most conveniently, I mean not close to hotel, it's nothing. The most conveniently, I mean that flowers are accessible. You can see the constructions of flowers of palms. And this is a story related with flowers of palms. Story about famous botanist Linnaeus. So Linnaeus was doing lots of classification of whole living organisms and of plants, and most famous was his sexual classification of plants. So he made 24 classes of plants on the base of very simple character, the number and structure of stamens. So first 12 characters of Linnaeus was exactly by number of stamens. It was like monandria for one stamen, diandria for two stamens, for 3, 4, 5, hexandria for 6 stamens, and so on. Then classes start to characterize the androecium, the general arrangement of stamens in slightly different ways. So for example, are they united in groups? Then classes characterize are flowers unisexual. And finally, the last class, of course, was flowers which don't have any visible stamens. So cryptogams. For example, ferns. In Linnaeus times, of course, it was nothing known about the life cycle of ferns. System worked perfectly. So he found one of the most perfect character, number and position arrangement of stamens. So worked so well that his system is still in use, especially mostly by tradition in Scandinavian countries, but also because it is relatively easy to understand which plant you are looking on, simply counting number of stamens. But there are still many manuals which use Linnaean system, and I see no problem in it. It's a perfect one. But this is very interesting thing. So 24 classes. But people who typically write history of botany forget that Linnaeus, in his first edition of Species Plantarum, very important book, listed 24 classes of plants, and then listed 25th one for palms. So Linnaeus separated palms from all other plants. So all plants in his classification were based simply on the structure of androecium, and as a second character he used also structures of pistils, of gynoecium. But palms was absolutely separate with the whole idea. Linnaeus was a methodist, so he wanted to use just one method to separate all plants in kind of understandable groups. There was opposition to Linnaeus. People, herbalists, for example, French botanist Manuel and many others who wanted to use many characters together. But Linnaeus' idea was just use just few characters to whole plant diversity. This idea failed in case of palms. So in the last few lines of his palm description, he started to explain that palm fructification are not well known. And this is the reason. Yes, it's not exactly why I'm sitting here, because palm, which is flowering conveniently, is rare. But if you go, and Linnaeus I think know very well, and look on flowers, you can look on them now. They have 6 stamens. So they should easily go to the class Hexandria, but Linnaeus didn't place. If you open his book on Hexandria, you will see no palms. Palms are separate. So I believe he had a second reason, and that reason was the life form of palms, so-called corner tree, is so unique, so characteristic. It will be very, well, kind of inconvenient to place palms in Hexandria. There was another reason. Not all palms in Linnaeus' understanding have number of stamens 6, because he also put in palms the cycas. Cycas, as you know, is a gymnosperm and it doesn't have typical flowers. But still, Linnaeus was kind of more or less free to put some little known groups in his classes, and for poems I see no problem. So Hexandria, but again poems were a group to which Linnaeus surrendered. He used natural method. Of course, he understood quite well what is a natural method. So, I mean, many characters together. So he don't like French approach, but he used it. In his books, typically in the very end, he listed so-called natural classes. And Linnaeus' student, Giesecke, after the death of Linnaeus, described Linnaeus' natural system. It was very nicely done. But again, poems was natural group, one of, well, exception in the Linnaeus classification. In all his 24 classes, he was perfect Methodist, but in class number 25, he was herbalist and used just character of life form, character of appearance to describe the group of poems. So this is how poems kind of broke Linnaeus' approach, not completely, but it still was very big exception in his ways. Thank you very much.